exactly does a protest become a riot?
This is criminal activity. There's a difference.
We looked up PPB's own definition. And what do black communities think of all the white Portlanders protesting for black lives? Well, like most things, it depends on who you ask. And in an alternate universe, I'm in Tokyo, Japan right now, covering the Olympics. Yeah, a lot has changed. Here's the story.
And humor me for just a bit. I'd like to play a little game of make-believe. I do it with my kids all the time. It's super fun. Let's imagine there's no coronavirus. I'm in Japan. I'm covering the Olympics for KGW live at 6 o'clock. Oh, hey, Bob Costas. Yes, I would love to grab a drink after this. I'm from Portland. Yeah, it's beautiful. And that's all it's known for because everything there is completely normal. Nothing is crazy at all. Okay, let's come back to reality. As we close out another week that was supposed to be the first week of the Olympic Games, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a bit. But in the meantime, let's talk about the here and the now, because it's really important stuff, and I know you have opinions on it, so let me hear it. Email us at thestory@kgw.com and use Twitter and that hashtag, HeyDan. And we are going to start off our big story tonight by talking about the power of words and how they can shape people's understanding of what's happening downtown. Of course, last night was more of the same. The night started without any violence, groups of people protesting in a fairly small area downtown, but after dark, that devolved into those clashes between federal officers and more aggressive and violent protesters. This morning, the media got this tour inside that famous fence around the federal building downtown. Federal authorities wanted to show us the graffiti and the litter and all the damage down there. We saw those water bottles, that umbrella, the bricks, trash, even bags of feces. Now, our team here on The Story, we spend a lot of time every single day working on how we are going to deliver news like that to you, tell those stories. We know the power of our words, and so do you, based on the emails that we get after every show. And what I just said is kind of how we decided to sum up last night in the coverage from this morning. But we thought you might find it interesting if we showed you how law enforcement described it, because Portland police and the Fed sent out two very different press releases this morning. Let's read how they started. First, this one from the Portland Police Bureau. Quote, a large group of more than 1,000 people gathered on Southwest 3rd Avenue outside of the Justice Center and Federal Courthouse in downtown Portland. For several hours, the group blocked traffic and vocalized in demonstration. Now, obviously, Portland police condemn what happened as the night went on, but that was a pretty matter-of-fact description of the early evening. Altogether, PPB referred to protesters as people 7 times. Now, let's read from the press release from Homeland Security. This is the first sentence. As they have for the past 54 days straight days, violent anarchists continue to riot on the streets of Portland as federal law enforcement officers work to diligently and honorably to enforce federal law by defending federal property and the lives of their fellow officers. All in all, DHS referred to the protesters 3 times as violent anarchists and referenced riots and rioters 16 times. The words anarchist and riot don't even appear in the PPB version of the events. This morning, during our little tour downtown, Oregon's U.S. Attorney Billy Williams had an opinion on the words being used by the media, accusing media outlets of describing the events with kid gloves.
These aren't late-night demonstrations. This is criminal activity. Okay. There's a difference. Okay. What you have failed in the media have failed to distinguish between, you seem unwilling to call people engaged in criminal conduct as criminals, as opposed to lawful protesting.
Well, some may argue that the way the federal agents are acting is criminal too, and we're not saying that.
Argue away on that.
But we're not saying either, so.
So I'm just saying there needs to be a distinction made between lawful, constitutionally protected protest and this.
And he is absolutely right. 100%. Everybody does, to make the distinction between legal protests and illegal behavior. But here's the thing, we do. Let's take the term riot, for example, because a lot of you tweet us and email me furious all the time that we're not categorizing these entire protests as riots every single night and calling everyone out there a rioter. But there is a reason, a specific reason that we don't do that, because rioting is a very specific legal term. You can be charged with rioting. It is a crime. So we need to be very careful that we're only using it to describe people who are actually taking part in a riot. Otherwise, we risk accusing people of crimes that they aren't committing. And not everyone in the crowd down there is clashing with police. There are observers and pastors and journalists and politicians and others. Not everyone is throwing a bottle or setting a fire. So our viewer Dan Cole asked the key question: what is the process for declaring a riot? Who gets to declare it, and what's being done to change it? Well, the good news is your answer is right on the Portland Police Bureau's website. They define a riot as 6 or more persons engaging in tumultuous and violent conduct and thereby intentionally or recklessly creating a grave risk of causing public alarm, excluding persons who are engaged in passive resistance. I want to repeat that last bit: excluding persons who are engaged in passive resistance. See, there is a huge difference between being part of a riot and being near a riot, and that's why we need to be careful about who we are calling rioters. It's also why there's that big issue about tear gas. I mean, one of the reasons why there's an issue with tear gas and why it's so controversial, because when it's deployed, it hurts everyone it touches, not just the people who are breaking the laws and rioting. And while that topic continues to be debated and litigated, the importance of the precision of our words is not. Now, someone who is really, really good with words is the man you're seeing here, New York Times columnist Nick Kristof from Oregon. He is a 2-time Pulitzer Prize winner. He's won one of them for his reporting on government suppression. He is back in town now covering the protest for the Times. He shot this video right here last night. And he thinks the first step toward ending this stalemate downtown at this point is for the feds to get out of Portland.
There are a lot of people who email me every night who think and tell me that the federal government is saving the day, that the protesters are unruly, they're violent, that they stand out there, that they go to the courthouse, they provoke police until police act, and then they scream police brutality. What is you've been out there, you've seen this. What would you say to those people who are writing me in every night? I get dozens of emails every time the show airs.
I mean, look, there is an element of truth to that. There is no doubt that there are people in the crowds who are provocateurs, who engage in that kind of provocation, so the federal forces will respond. And that's, again, that's not a Portland issue. That's, I mean, I've covered protests like this in I don't know how many countries around the world. And that is a dynamic that happens in all kinds of protests. And it is incumbent on the authorities then to find ways to diffuse the situation rather than to pour gasoline on top of it. And when you have federal forces present like this, you know, their very presence adds to the problem. And so I think it's perfectly fair to criticize some of the protesters for violence, for provocations. But what is going on right now is not helpful, except perhaps for President Trump's reelection campaign.
Kristof thinks the federal government should focus on helping Oregon with COVID-19 relief, not crowd control. But you can hear how he lays it all out on the KGW YouTube channel right now. We're going to post my full conversation with Nick. You can check it out there. Now, here in the story, we like to share journalism that we think is worth your time. And today we found 2 examples we'd like to recommend. One in the New York Times, another in the Washington Post. And both share different perspectives from black Portlanders about white people taking part in these downtown protests. So the Times kind of lays it all out in the headline. They say how one of America's whitest cities became the center of Black Lives Matter protests. The story even quotes a black Portlander who says there are more Black Lives Matter signs in Portland than black people. Now, there is criticism in this piece for white people involved in all of this, but there's also hope. Another man told the Times about Portland, saying, "I feel the most protected that I ever have in my city." Meanwhile, the Washington Post carried an op-ed written by Edie Mondonay. He's the president of Portland's chapter of the NAACP, and he claims white people have co-opted the movement and turned it into a spectacle. He uses the example of Naked Athena. She's the anonymous white woman who stood naked in front of police, in front of the police lines. He said that she's not elevating voices of black people. She's just proving her own white privilege. Both articles give a lot of insight into the many different ways black Portlanders feel about the protests and the white people involved in them. So earlier this week, I shared part of my interview with Ayanna. She's running against Mayor Ted Wheeler, and she's extremely critical of his handling of these protests, both in person and on Twitter. And tonight, I want to share more of our conversation as we started with her thoughts on the feds in Portland.
No one in the city right now is happy about them being here. I walk down the street when I'm out walking my dog and people are outside on their phones who you don't generally think, they're not the ones with all the political signs in their yards. And you can hear them talking to their friends on the phone, to their neighbors across the fence. What are these feds doing in Portland? So this is something we can all agree on. We don't want them here. I think the problem that I have, and maybe what you're referring to, is, last week, the Portland Police union representative was meeting with DHS Secretary Wolf. We know that Portland Police have been at least communicating with, if not cooperating with, Donald Trump's secret police, and really all of them have been acting without care for human life. And then the mayor of Portland goes on national TV on a circuit, really, washing out, I think, the last 50 or so days prior to the feds' arrival of the fact that Portland Police Bureau were tear gassing Black Lives Matter demonstrators in the streets, that Portland police were arresting journalists and, labor and peace, ALCU representatives there legal advisors and ALCU representatives on the ground. And so you have to ask yourself, are they fighting over tactics or over turf? I mean, for Portlanders who've been out at these protests for a while now, my argument is we don't care which law enforcement is brutalizing us. Police brutality should not be the response to demonstrations about police brutality, period.
What about some of the moments that have really stood out during all of this? Just to point to a few, federal agent shooting a person in the face with a rubber bullet was one that really upset a lot of people. Then there was another moment where there were vehicles, there was officers in an unmarked van away from the Justice Center detaining a person who appeared to be protesting, putting them into a van and driving off. These are moments that the federal government has explained their side of things. But how do you feel now after hearing their explanation as to why they had an unmarked vehicle and things of that nature?
When you really pull out and look at this, our local policymakers need to be very clear about what we consider violence. We have people looking at the graffiti on that courthouse and calling it violence, calling us violent anarchists for essentially what some people have done is spray paint on a building. There's never any excuse for shooting, whether you call it a less lethal or more lethal munition, into the head, injuring one of our Portlanders. And I don't know that we're ever going to be able to rein in that behavior, but unequivocally on the part of our leadership should be zero tolerance for it. But again, how can we expect zero tolerance from the feds when we have not had zero tolerance with our own police bureau?
Again, Ayanna, of course, running for mayor against Ted Wheeler. We are working on getting some one-on-one time with the mayor. In the meantime, as we work on that, and when we do, we will ask him all the same tough questions we've been asking everybody. You can check out my full interview with Ayanna. I actually talked to her twice in 2 weeks. They're both online right now, once before and after the most recent spike of protests downtown. Check them out on our YouTube channel.
Portland City Council got asked the same question.
Do you think Joanne Hardesty should be police commissioner?
And gave two different answers. And we asked a different question to you. What brings you joy?
Being outside, definitely.
Honestly, in the kids. Friends, family, music.
Being out with my girl.
And man, I can't wait to share the rest when the story continues.
Hey, welcome back. Keep using that hashtag #HeyDan to chat with us. Let us know what you think. Really, everything you say helps drive this show. In fact, I'll show you. Let's get to a question right now. Terry O'Malley asked about a big name in Portland politics. They want to know, will you have Sam Adams on the show, on The Story? Thank you for asking, Terry. Appreciate it. Right now, we don't actually have any immediate plans to have Adams on the show, even though he was recently a candidate for Portland City Council. He ran against Chloe Eudaly in May for her commissioner seat, but he didn't get enough votes to make it to the runoff election. That'll be Eudaly and Mingus Maps. They had the most, which means Portlanders will vote between those two come November. So Adams is out of the running. Now, we do eventually plan to have Eudaly and Maps on to make their case to Portland voters, but probably not until after our August special election. And that's between two people viewers of the story here are probably very familiar with by now, Loretta Smith and Dan Ryan. They're running for the late Nick Fish's empty seat on City Council. Smith, a longtime politician here locally, and Ryan as a newcomer to public office. Now, Laurel Porter had both of them on Straight Talk and has them on tonight. And Commissioner Hardesty's name came up a lot. Hardesty has endorsed Ryan for the job and has a pretty rocky history with Smith. They ran a tense campaign against each other in 2018, and Hardesty won. And since Hardesty recently said she's open to becoming police commissioner, Laurel asked both candidates if they'd support her in that role.
Would you be in favor of the mayor giving up being police commissioner and making Joanne Hardesty police commissioner? Dan, first.
That's a conversation that they're having themselves, and I trust that those two fine people are having that conversation. I think what I care about is that all five of us who are part of the city council are focused on this issue. One reason I wanted to get rid of this archaic form of 5 mini mayor government where people get lost in their own little micro bureaus, micro bureaus, is that we need to be a team, and the team has to function, and the team has to stay focused on the top priorities of our time. Police reform work is that. I've never had any long-term relationship with the police department. I have a track record of being tough and doing culture change work with unions. And so I'm looking forward to being that person to do that culture
Loretta
change
Smith,
work.
do you think Joanne Hardesty should be police commissioner?
I think she should. I trust her leadership. And I think if someone's going to trust you, you need to trust them. And it's really interesting that you can get support from a sitting counselor, but you don't support their leadership to lead the police. She's had decades of experience of fighting police reform, and now he's going to backtrack on someone who is his major endorsement. I don't think that that fits. I don't think that that works. I know that we may have some disagreements, but I do know that I will support Joanne Hardesty for the police commissioner.
All right, ballots have already been mailed out for the August 11th special election. You can watch the full conversation. Laurel Porter on Straight Talk tonight at 7 o'clock. Dan Ryan on Loretta Smith are her guests. It's also on Saturday at 4:30 and Sunday at 6:30. All right, let's lighten up a bit. All right, it's Friday, for crying out loud. It has been a long week after a bunch of long weeks, and man, sports is back. Have you noticed that? Which is like the first normalish thing to happen in about 4 months. So I wanted to talk to Orlando Sanchez about some of the sports headlines, but there's a lot to talk about, and it's only a half-hour show, so I had to lay down some ground rules. Okay, we got Orlando Sanchez here with us, and we're talking about sports. We have a couple different topics to cover. We don't have a ton of time, so I'm going to do just like in the NBA. I'm going to put you on a shot clock. You got 24 seconds to tell us what we need to know about each one of these topics. Are you up for it?
Oh, it's going to be fun, man.
All right, here we go. Let's start by talking about the Blazers. They had a scrimmage yesterday against the Pacers. Rip City is back. Orlando, you are on the clock. Go.
Portland Trail Blazers fans, Rip City, go crazy. It's been more than 4 months since the last time we've seen them on the court. This was our first glimpse of what this team could potentially look like when the games really count. More than anything, Yusuf Nurkic, Zach Collins back on the court for the first time since their gruesome injury. So it was good to see them, and it looked like they didn't miss a step. So,
all right, 24 seconds goes quick. You're done. You are done, sir. That's all the time you got. Tell us right now, did they win or did they lose?
They lost, but it doesn't matter.
Okay, moving on. So, next, Orlando, we're talking Olympics. We were supposed to be involved in the Olympics as we speak. They, of course, were postponed because of COVID. They are now 364 days away. So we are within a year. Tell us, what do we need to know about the now upcoming Olympics within a year? Ready, go.
Yeah, first and foremost, today would have been opening ceremonies. We would have seen thousands of athletes celebrating and enjoying what was going to be the biggest moments of their career, and now they have to wait another year. But I guess on the bright side is At this point, they will have another year to get ready for this thing when there were so many unknowns. At least there is a date that these athletes can prepare for and look towards the future.
That's it. You're
when
done.
When things are going crazy,
End
man,
with
they didn't
future.
have that opportunity.
That's right. That's right. Orlando, thank you. 24 seconds goes fast. You know what I mean? You think about it, you're dribbling down the court. You don't have a whole lot of time to score that bucket, but you're doing well so far. Let's talk about baseball. It is also back. We got Mariners and Astros tonight. Go.
Man, this is crazy. Last night, opening day, for a while there, it looked like we weren't going to have Major League Baseball because they couldn't get their act together and put together a plan that was going to work for both the players. But we got to see it in action, and people are dying to see baseball. Last night had one of the biggest ratings in the past 7, 8, 9 years between the Yankees and Nationals. Good to see baseball back.
That was almost perfectly 24 seconds. You're getting good at this. No fans in the stands, but I thought was interesting. They had cardboard cutouts, which was kind of funny. But yeah, it's fun to watch baseball. I'm glad it's back. Let's talk about people dying to see baseball in Portland. All right, we got the Portland Diamond Project. That's still all in the works. Have you gotten an update from them at all? I know you talked to somebody recently. Let's put you on the clock. 24 seconds starting now.
It was good to talk to Mike Barrett, one of the main men, the managing director for the Portland Diamond Project, and he wants everyone to know that they are alive and well. They are doing their thing. They are still receiving interest and support, both financially and through the crowd here in Portland who really wants it. 60,000 people have signed their petition to bring MLB to PDX. Look out for more information. We will have that coming up at 6:30 and on Sports Sunday.
I gave you about 27 seconds for that one. Gave you a little extra, little leeway there. I know people
Let
want
me
to hear
have the
about
plug.
That's right. That's right. People want to hear about the Portland Diamond Project. Orlando, you crushed it. Thank you very much, sir. We appreciate it. I got to match that guy's energy somehow. He's got more energy. He's the man. Thank you to Orlando. That was great. Look, I know we didn't get into a lot of comments or questions on the show tonight. We got a ton that we want to read for you coming up after the break. So we also want to have. We're going to finish the story by asking everybody the same question: what brings you joy? Stick around. Hey, so getting to some comments here. Peter writing in and saying, media never labels people accused of crimes as criminals because they are innocent until proven guilty. And you're exactly right there. But I think what people are more concerned with is when they see video of people who are committing obvious crimes and we don't know specifically who they are, we can at least say that the people who we are seeing doing a crime, we can call them criminals. But for us, protesters has been an easier word that I don't think is all that confusing. When you see people standing and marching and being peaceful, and I say protester, you know what I mean. When you see people pushing a police officer or throwing a bottle or something like that, and I say protester, I think you know what I mean. I don't think it's very difficult for you to decide between the two. And then talking about the statements that we read off the top, Lauren said, obviously the Portland Police Department was referring to the earlier portion of the evening, whereas the federal authorities are focusing on the latter part of their statements. I agree with you there as well. But as we were talking about words mattering, we wanted to talk about how they were starting those statements. And those weren't the only words that we pointed out and how those two statements were different. It's not just the words, it's how you arrange them. Trust me, we know that very well here on this story, because when we arrange them in a way you don't like, you let us know. Keep letting us know. Keep holding us to task. We'll keep telling these stories the best way we can. Thank you for being with us this week. As always, the news at 6:30 is next, and we're going to leave you tonight with this piece from our photojournalist Ken McCormick, who went out and wanted to know one thing. What brings you joy? Have a good night. Stay safe. We'll get through this together.
What's bringing me joy right now? Being outside, definitely. Talking with family and friends who I wouldn't normally reach out to is bringing me joy.
Where am I finding joy? Honestly, in the kids.
Just being able to spend more time with my family.
My grandkids bring me joy. Although I don't get to see them as much with what's going on, but they bring me joy.
Family is bringing me joy these days. I'd say the same for me.
Friends, family, music. It's all bringing me joy these days.
Honestly, what's bringing me joy these days, it is pretty crazy, but I guess it's just like outside, being able to just breathe in fresh air, get it some vitamin D in the sun.
The simple things, you know, sunshine, being out with my girl, simple things.
Yeah, I just ride my bike and stay away from everybody, and that's what I do. So.
And that brings you joy.
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah.
Random acts of kindness, just loving people. When people do that, it just lightens my world and makes me feel a lot better and makes me feel like the world's not coming to an end, you know?
Getting out and about. We get out and we call it a stroll and a roll. It's not the material things, it's not cars and houses, but it's relationships and people in my life.
And showing kindness. I think that's the biggest thing, is showing kindness nowadays. So that's what's bringing me joy.
Something that's bringing me joy is helping people.
I am a social worker at a homeless shelter, and I also am a social worker at a nonprofit property management, and that is what brings me joy. I love my work.
Just being out and about with my wife today, and just getting some ice cream and enjoying the weather.
And then when we come home, you know, just doing things that help us unwind, playing video games and just watching Netflix and chilling.